So good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Rainer Kurt Dinkelmann, and I'm here to talk to you about a study that was carried out in the Haliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve, preventing regeneration of American beech following harvest in response to beech bark disease, effects of glyphosate application to beech stumps 1 year after treatment. So American beech, or Fagus grandifolia, is a shade-tolerant deciduous tree species found throughout the tolerant hardwood forests of central and southern Ontario. Beech typically doesn't have a high timber value, but its management is important in production forest settings because its shade tolerance inhibits the regeneration and growth of other more desirable tree species. Beech is a food source for a few animal species, including some birds, some rodents, and black bear. And beech is currently facing one of the most important forest diseases in Eastern North America, beech bark disease. So beech bark disease is a disease complex comprised of an invasive scale insect, the beech scale, and one of several species of Nectria fungi, So the scale invades the tree, creating holes in the bark to feed on the woody material beneath the bark. And these holes then allow the fungi to enter the tree. And the combination of the insects and the fungi ends up putting the tree under increasing stress, eventually girdling it and killing it. So infected beech trees tend to die relatively quickly, or they hang around for a couple of years, severely cankered and not doing too well. So if you look at the picture there, you see an infected tree on the left, which doesn't look too great. And on the right is actually a disease-resistant beech tree. So only about 1 to 5% of beech trees are actually resistant to beech bark disease, but the disease is found in about half of the natural range of beech. Unfortunately, there are no known cures for beech bark disease, and so forest managers tend to just try to reduce its proportion in the forest. So because beech reduction is the aim in forest settings, the ways in which beech reproduce is an important consideration. This is especially true because in addition to reproducing sexually through seed production, beech can reproduce asexually through clonal root shoots, which are stems that grow from the root system of mature beech trees. The relative densities of seed source and root source regeneration can vary considerably. So you can have the complete absence of root source regeneration up to almost complete dominance of root source regeneration. And this is important because these root source regeneration stems are connected to the root systems of the tree, and so they just have access to more resources and nutrients for growth. And the science bears this out. So a 2008 study showed that root source stems grew at an average rate of about 5 times more in their first year than seed source stems. So the root source stems grew about 13.9 centimeters in their first year, and the seed source stems grew only about 2.6 centimeters. And so one question worth asking is, what causes these root shoots? So typically they're caused by tree or root injury, including harvest activity or beech bark disease. And the problem is that with increased disturbances, we get increased density of beech stems. So other species end up being outcompeted. In an extreme case, this can lead to the development of beech thickets in the forest, where you just have these pockets of monocultures of beech stems. And at the time, it's not really known whether harvesting or beech bark disease are more conducive to the creation of these beech thickets, but studies seem to indicate that these thickets are comprised predominantly of root source beech regeneration stems. So questions about beech regeneration and management have come up in Haliburton Forest, which is where this study took place. So Haliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve is located about 270 kilometers northeast of Toronto. This is a private forest located in Haliburton County, and it's owned and operated by a sustainable multi-use land stewardship company. Haliburton Forest is about 40,000 hectares in size, and about 3/4 of that is production forest. And half of the production forest includes a tree canopy with at least 10% beech in it. So because beech represents such a high proportion of the canopy in the forest, and because of the impacts of beech bark disease, the managers at Haliburton Forest are very interested in how they can reduce the proportion of beech in the regeneration layer of the forest. So previous work studying how to limit beech regeneration with herbicides has been carried out. I just want to point out that herbicide use is in general frowned upon, and that any potential benefit should far outweigh any downsides that the herbicide use may present. So notably, these previous studies include several by Gorgolewski, as well as a study that was carried out by Cameron Duckett in 2020 in the Haliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve. So the Duckett study aimed to determine the effect of cut stump glyphosate application in conjunction with salvage harvest of beech, specifically in stands that had higher proportions of root source beech regeneration stems. Results regarding the mortality in this study weren't as conclusive as results in the current study or as the Kochendorfer studies, likely due to the length of time between measurements pre and post treatment. So in the Duckett study, the time period was only about 1 to 2 months, whereas for the current study and for the Kochendorfer studies, the time period was about 12 months. So the 2006 Kochendorfer results, which are more conclusive than the Duckett study, showed mortality rates of more than 90% in all size classes. This current study differs from previous studies in that the stand within which it was conducted had a beech regeneration layer comprised predominantly of seed source regeneration, but no standard method was used for determining this. So the results from the study can't be said to apply exclusively to stands that have a predominant layer of seed source regeneration. The main objective of the study then was to determine the effectiveness of herbicide treatment in controlling beech regeneration. Specifically, the question surrounded the efficacy of treatment in the stand in which the beech regeneration predominantly came from seed source. So the data collected to help answer this question included density of beech and other tree species within a 5-meter radius of beech stumps. Additionally, percent covered of beech and other species in one size class was collected within the 5-meter radius as well. So 10 treated plots and 10 control plots were chosen within a 1 hectare stand that had a canopy comprised of about 66% beech. Each plot was 5 meters in radius and centered around a mature beech tree marked for salvage harvest. And in July of 2020, beech trees were harvested and the stumps were treated within 4 days, with a glyphosate solution. So in the picture here, you see a beech stump that's been, looks like it was painted. That's the glyphosate solution. This is called the cut stump application. And this was carried out in all treatment plots on all beech trees larger than 20 centimeters diameter at breast height. Another treatment that was also used is hack and squirt, also using the same glyphosate application. And this took place on trees between 13 and 20 centimeters diameter at breast height, where you take a sharp tool or a hatchet and you cut lesions around the stem of the tree, and then you spray the glyphosate application into these lesions. Density data was collected in 4 size classes: extra small, small, medium, and large. And percent cover data was only collected in the extra small size class. The initial data was collected within 6 weeks of treatment, and subsequent data was collected about 12 months later. All analyses that I ran with this data were conducted with RStudio with a confidence interval of 95%. All figures were produced using Microsoft Excel, and both the density and the percent cover data were transformed by adding a constant and then log transforming the resulting figures. I approached this data with the hypothesis that density of beech would increase in untreated plots, but not in treated plots, with the secondary effect being that smaller size classes would see a greater treatment effect than larger size classes. I also carried out a 3-way analysis of variance to test for this and found that separately, both treatment and size class had a statistically significant effect on density. The combined effect of treatment and size class also showed a statistically significant effect on density. So moving on to the results of the extra small size class and focusing first on the box plot on the left here, we see the beech density in the 2 measurement periods. So on the x-axis, we have the time of measurement, and on the y-axis, we have the stem density per plot. The green boxes represent the untreated plots, and we'll do the same throughout the rest of my presentation, and the yellow boxes represent the treated plots. As we can see, the line between the means of the treated and the untreated plots have a positive slope. So those are the lines that you see here between the x's on the plots. And this positive slope means that there's an increase in density in both the treated and the untreated plots between the time periods. The box plot on the right now is a slightly different representation of the same thing, where we see the average change in density between the 2 time periods. So on the x-axis, we again have the size class, and on the y-axis now we have the change in stem density per plot. Again, we see that the average density increased in both the treated and the untreated plots, but that it increased to a far greater degree in the untreated plots. This suggests a treatment effect. But if we look back to the box plot on the left, and we focus on the initial measurement period, we see that the untreated plots started off with a substantially higher density of beech stems than the treated plots. This suggests that an absolute change in density in treated plots would be lower even if they weren't treated, and possible reasons why the untreated plots.
Where is my? Oh, look at you! You are my baby boy. You know how much I love you. Who is my lazy boy?
Yeah, I'll just continue. So possible reasons why the untreated plots might have more beech density than the treated plots could be that the trees in those areas were more treated by beech bark disease and the stress just caused more root shoots, or there may just have been more seed source in those areas. And now moving on to the other size classes, we see again 2 box plots. So I have the small, medium, and large size class. On the x-axis, we have size class, and on the y-axis for both plots, we have the stem density per plot. So I didn't include the extra small size class here because the y-axis would increase exponentially and we wouldn't be able to see as clearly the difference between these size classes. I do have another box plot that'll show the change in density, but I wanted to show these to give some context to the magnitude of the change in density between the 2 time periods. So we can see again that the untreated plots increase to a relatively greater extent than the treated plots. So here's the box plot showing the average change in density for those 3 size classes. Again, on the x-axis again, we have the size class, and on the y-axis, we now have the change in density per plot. Again, you see the treatment effect in that the untreated plots see a greater increase in density than the treated plots. But the interesting thing to note is that the increase in density in the untreated plots decreases as the size class increases. So this makes sense when you consider that it's harder and takes more resources to grow into the next size class. So as we saw in the previous slide, the average stem density neither increases nor decreases in the treated plots in any size class to any great degree. And the reason for this is probably that treatment is killing off stems in all size classes. And then we have ingrowth and outgrowth between the size classes. So stems from the extra small size class are recruiting into the small size class, somewhat negating the effect of treatment in that small size class. And then stems from the small size class are recruiting into the medium size class and so on. So the results of my study relative to others is that a typical indicator of treatment effect is that there's a decrease in beech density. This was observed in Kochendorfer's 2006 and subsequent studies. And it was confirmed in the current study where a definitive treatment effect was observed on the beech density in plots treated with the cut stump glyphosate application. If this is indeed a stand with a higher proportion of seed source beech regeneration, treatment effects are promising for other areas of the forest where control of beech regeneration is desired. So there are a couple of management implications suggested by the study. First, it appears that cut stump glyphosate application in conjunction with salvage harvesting is effective at controlling beech stems within the regeneration layer. And this appears to hold true even in stands like this one where there's reportedly a higher proportion of seed source beech regeneration. Second, as with previous studies, including the Duckett 2020 study at Haliburton Forest, this study affirms that this type of treatment doesn't really have any detrimental effect on stems of other tree species within the treated plots. So on the contrary, it seems that these other tree species benefit from the treatment since the beech is now reduced and isn't competing for the light and the nutrients, and that allows these other species to benefit. So my recommendations are that cut stump and hack and squirt applications of glyphosate in conjunction with salvage harvest is an effective method of controlling beech regeneration in forest stands with relatively high proportions of beech in the overstory pre-harvest, assuming that the benefits outweigh any negative impacts from herbicide use. I'd just like to take a moment as well to say thank you to all the people who helped me with and contributed to the study. First of all, thank you to John Caspersen, my internal supervisor, who so graciously guided me through this study and probably alternated between feelings of despair and loneliness. Despair because of my work and loneliness because I was his only MFC student this semester. I'd also like to thank Adam Gorgolewski at Haliburton Forest, not only for providing me with the data, but for taking the time to help me understand the best ways in which to analyze and interpret the data. I'd also like to give a shout out to any Haliburton Forest staff that helped collect this data. And then I just want to give a special shout out to a handful of classmates and colleagues and my MFC cohort who were there for me throughout this process, helping me understand what to do with the data and providing me with the support I needed. So these include Vanessa, Monique, Zoe, Emmett, Ben, Verna, Aditi, and of course, Catherine Edwards. And finally, a really special shout out to Ashley, my wife, Ava, my daughter, and my family for their patience, love, and support. Thank you.
Reiner, do we have any questions? Well, actually, no, pardon me. I've asked Adam to ask the first question. So Adam, if you're there, go ahead.
Hi, Reiner. Thanks very much. Good job. So yeah, my main question is, based on the results from this study and your analysis, and based on what you already know about glyphosate, or I guess what you've learned from it about it through this process,
Yep.
do you think we know enough to go ahead and say, yes, we can do this on a somewhat larger scale in Haliburton Forest after a harvest in an area with a lot of beech? Or do you think there's more research that needs to be done? And if there is more research that needs to be done, then what do you think that needs to be?
I guess it depends what scale you're talking at, but considering the results from this study and from the Kochendorfer results, I think you could go ahead. I actually wondered if the treatment effect for this study is somewhat diluted because of the 6-week period between treatment and initial data collection. So, I mean, I would think that maybe the treatment effect might be even stronger, especially in the extra small size class.
Great, thanks very much.
Sorry, you didn't present any data actually on the other species besides beech, right? So you're assuming that they'll.
Yeah, so I just didn't include that data.
Okay, so you do have some
Yes.
evidence that there is actually positive effects on the other species, because that's the point, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So okay, good. That seems essential. And the other kind of pressing question, there's been a lot of recent attention to the toxicity of glyphosate for people, particularly those who are applying things. Are there some good alternatives?
Yeah, actually, the one study by Kochendorfer showed that 2 years post-treatment, in both the treated and the untreated plots, they had a reduction in stem density of seed source regeneration by over 80%, just caused, or what they presume was caused by opening the canopy that much. So I think there are probably some alternatives out there. I think glyphosate is really appealing because it's controlled in how you're applying it and where it ends up going. From my basic understanding of it, like it's not being sprayed. So yeah, that's probably my best answer. Go ahead, John.
All right. Is this working? Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Reiner. It's kind of working. Every other sentence works. Okay. I have a question just about the motivation for this study. So I gather that people at Haliburton were concerned about stands that had a larger proportion of seed origin beech seedlings. Is there, I guess, is there any evidence, I mean, in your reading of the literature, is there any evidence that that beech thickets are especially likely to form in seed origins, stands that have more seed origin saplings? Yeah, and or is there any evidence, why did Haliburton develop this concern in the first place?
With regards to Haliburton, I mean, maybe Adam would answer this better, but I'll just do my best shot here. I think, I mean, like I mentioned, there's a relatively high proportion of beech in the overstory there, and they're focused on getting forest products from the forest, like that's what their business is focused on, and I guess they don't want that limited in any way, and so they would address the beech issue. As far as beech thickets in seed origin stands, I don't, from my reading of the literature, it's not, so the highest proportion of stems within a thicket is typically from root source regeneration, but I didn't read anything saying whether it develops more in seed source origin than root source origin.
Okay. I mean, you did say one thing that made me wonder. So you said that root sprouts grow 5 times faster or something like that than seed origin. So I would think then that maybe thicket formation would be more of an issue in
Right.
those kinds of stands and less of an issue in seed origin stands. And maybe maybe it's not only does your method seem to work still, but maybe it's not really a problem in the first place.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I should have added the caveat too with that study that was conducted in a greenhouse. So maybe the conditions would be slightly different out in the wild, but, and that's also only the first year of growth. And after that, they slow down substantially, but yeah, I think you're right. I don't know if it actually is an issue in more seed source stands.
Great, thank you. Ben, you are online. You have a question?
Reiner, great job, buddy.
Thank
Just
you.
want to ask, would you expect different results if you had a higher treatment level? I'm just wondering, is there a sort of threshold where glyphosate works? Like if you applied more to it, would you expect different results?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I did read one study that where they did test the different concentrations, but from what I recall, it's like 50%, I think, solution is what's recommended on the product, and once you go above that, it's not really your effect isn't any greater. So, yeah.
Right, diminishing returns. Excellent,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
Very interesting presentation. I don't know if it's working. I'll stand up too. Okay, so I have to shout. Okay, well, I don't know. Okay. So the study was for basically over a year's period, it seems, you're testing. Do you think that's adequate in predicting outcomes, especially given the sort of longevity of forests and their evolution? Do you think that this really tells us that we're going to get a good outcome in the end?
I mean, I think even my reference to that Kochendorfer study where 2 years post-treatment, they saw an effect in control plots and in treated plots kind of answers the question. No, I don't think a year really is enough time to see what the effects are. Yeah.
We have time for another quick question. Oh. So Catherine Edwards online, and then Sandy.
Or maybe
Hi. Oh,
maybe
sorry.
go to Thomas McKay. He's in Haliburton Forest.
Thomas, if you'd like to ask a question, go ahead. Then we'll go with Catherine.
Well, I hate to step on Catherine's toes, so I'll go second.
It's okay. Go ahead. It's fine.
All right. Well, thanks very much for the presentation. I'm curious if you know, or would you like to speculate on the mechanism by which a cut stump glyphosate treatment would affect seed origin beech regeneration?
I mean, instinctively, what I think of is mycorrhizal connections, but I don't understand glyphosate sufficiently to really say if that's if it'd be transmissible through that mechanism. I mean, other than that, just user, call it error, I guess, if you spilled it or something. But other than that, yeah, I'm not really sure how that cut stump glyphosate application treatment would affect seed source stems.
Yeah, fair. I'm wondering if we have reason, unless Adam, or in your paper you can provide some more definitive proof, but I'm wondering if we are dealing with a sucker origin stand here, because otherwise I don't see why we would be seeing that effect, or else seeing a selective effect against the beech versus the other species.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll include that for
Something
sure.
to verify, I think, before the final paper.
Okay.
I can quickly chime in here. So one of the reasons that we wanted to do the study in an area that had a lot of seed source beech is because the process of harvesting has been shown to trigger root suckering in beech stands. So we kind of wanted to essentially test that theory, whether if that happens and then we treat, can we prevent it from
Right.
happening? Kind of a step in some ways. So yeah, the theory being that harvesting causes suckering, so we should treat after a harvest anyway.
Right.
And it seems that that was the case because there still seemed to be an increase in beech in the harvested plots that were not treated compared to the ones that were.
Thank you, Adam.
Catherine, last question.
Yeah, hi. Great job, Reiner. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
that presentation. I'm wondering if you think, based on the data that you have about how other species, the regeneration of other species has been impacted, if you think that supplemental underplanting would be required or should be recommended.
Yeah, I think maybe that would depend on the management situation or the like maybe it would make more sense in, let's say, York Regions forests than it would make sense in a production forest in Haliburton, just from a cost benefit perspective. I'm sure there would be some benefits for sure, but I think the costs would have to be weighed against that. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Reiner.
Thank you, everybody.